Yet another inspirational video. Not really. I feel like there are so many videos on Instagram and YouTube that have to do with self-help, plenty of self-love gurus, many of which have actually helped me get through some very tough times in life. It just feels like anyone and everyone is an expert these days. So what makes me an expert? I'm not. The topic I'm about to go into is one I feel very strongly about, and it's one I do have personal experience with. I do want to stress on the fact, though, that these are just my thoughts and opinions. Just me from my kitchen, unedited, uncensored, unfiltered, sharing my opinions with you, many of which you may or may not agree with me on, and that's fine. Just putting the topic out there, getting people to talk about it is good enough for me. I do have a degree in psychology though, so many of my opinions have been shaped through 4 years of intensive psychological studies. So let's get right into it. Suicide. An estimated 1 million people lose their lives each year as a result of suicide. In Sweden, where I live, 3% of people ended up losing their lives as a result of suicide in 2019. What's worse, 25% of these people were 65 years old and above. We're in a pandemic today where 65 years old and older is the very group that is in focus. There are newspaper headlines everywhere you turn, you hear about COVID-19. You don't see as much on suicide prevention. In fact, I can't remember the last time I read a front page article on suicide. Why is that? I was at a dinner party the other day with one of my best friends, and we got into the topic. The idea of how do you know whether speaking to a person you suspect is contemplating suicide, how do you know whether that does more damage than good? What if speaking to the person actually pushes them over the edge? How do you approach speaking to someone? How do you address it? Do you even address it? The answer is yes. Please ask. If you suspect someone you know is depressed or contemplating suicide, don't be afraid to ask them if they are, and more importantly, how they intend on doing it. Many times we don't ask the person. It has less to do with them and reflects more on how we feel. Can we cope with the answers? It has to do with our own internal states. But if you put that aside, and if you look at studies on what it has to do with the person who has suicidal thoughts, it helps. You're not going to do damage. On the contrary. By asking somebody, studies have shown just by sometimes even saying hi to somebody who is in that pattern of thought or in the zone, just by saying hi to them can actually snap them out of it. It gives them a sense of being seen, somebody cares, somebody acknowledges them. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask. There's also a practical side of it. By finding out how they intend on doing it, by knowing a plan, in this case, my friends, knowledge is power. By finding out how they plan on doing it, you could actually put a stop to it. In some cases. If you know, I had a situation where I found out someone I knew had expressed that he wanted to end his life. So I confronted him about it. And during the conversation, I learned that this person had a doctor's appointment planned soon. So if you get information that, for instance, this type of information that I had received, if you get to know that, you could perhaps contact the hospital staff, contact the doctor, and actually put a stop to it. Probably prevent them from writing or prescribing more medication than needed, a very strong medication. You get where I'm going? So don't be afraid to ask. And you are not going to do more damage than good. You're not going to push them off the edge if the thought hadn't existed to begin with. If you think about the time or times when you felt like shit and someone came up to you, I have times where I felt really bad and someone came up to me and they go, "How are you? Are you good?" And you know you're feeling like shit. It's just the waterworks come on. Have you ever felt that way? It's not because they planted the thought in your head. No, it's because you were feeling that way to begin with. But by someone asking you, it just brought it up to the surface. So by asking someone, you're not going to plant thoughts. Those thoughts had existed to begin with. So don't be afraid of that. So now that we know it's all right to ask someone how they're feeling, you're not going to do damage, how do you go about doing it? How do you approach someone? Well, it depends on the person. If it's someone who you're very close to and you know is acting unlike themselves, address it right on. I sense a change in you. How are you feeling? If you know the person is depressed, go ahead and ask them. I see you're very sad. I see you're depressed. How bad is it? Have you ever contemplated ending your life? How would you do it? Go ahead and ask. There's this behavioral change stairway developed by the FBI that has to do with hostage situations, negotiating in hostage situations. And I think it can be applied to suicide as well, because suicidal people are hostages of their own situation. And some of the steps in this stairway is... the first one is active listening. I got my notes over here, cheat notes. The first one is active listening. You don't have to try solving somebody's problem. Listen. That's why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen. Ask your question and then wait for the reply and be able to handle it. Know how you're feeling before you approach this type of situation. If you're feeling crappy yourself, do not have that conversation. If you know you are emotional, do not have that conversation. When you feel like you are emotionally stable, that's when you approach. That's when you ask the person so you're okay with the answer. And then you go on to the next step, which is empathy. Empathy isn't the same as sympathy. Empathy, being able to relate. We've all had times where we have felt sad, where we have felt hopeless. Everyone's felt that way. So if you've ever been sad, if you've ever felt like crap, you can make a difference in this person's life. Because you can relate. So go ahead. And from empathy, the next step comes on where you build a rapport, where you build trust. Once you've built trust with the person, the next step is influence, where you can try to have an impact on their thought. Maybe mention what it would mean to you if the person ended their life. In my situation, where I met this person, I actually spent half a day with that person in psychiatric care. What I did was I went in with the approach that this was a person who had decided that this is it. And it's very hard to approach someone who has made up their mind. So when I went in, I put it out there that I'm not here to change your mind. I need to do this for me though, because this is not something, if I do not do my best, and if I don't do all that I can in my power, this is a decision I have to live with. You end your life, but this is something I have to live with the rest of my life. So for my sake, let me do all that I can. Some would go ahead and say that's emotional blackmail. I don't see it that way. I think it's just doing all you can in your power for the person to understand where you're coming from. Once you build that trust, once you build that rapport, once they feel like they can speak to you, that is when you bring about change. It can't always be prevented, but at least you know you tried. There was a question that I received the other day. What is the likelihood of someone actually opening up to you and revealing their plans, revealing that they are suicidal? How good of a chance do you have? I can tell you your chances are a lot higher than if you ask than if you don't ask. So you have absolutely nothing to lose by going ahead and asking the person. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid of pushing them over the edge. On the contrary, get as much details as you can. And read up on it. Get yourself educated. You never know when you may need this. Go read up, get educated. And if you are someone watching this video right now and you feel like you're not feeling very good and you have suicidal thoughts, educate us, please. Speak to somebody who you know you can trust. Tell them how you feel. People care. We have a video on how to speak to you. That's how much we care. So help us help you, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You are the reason for someone's happiness, even if it doesn't feel that way right now. If you think about Robin Williams, his death had an impact on millions of people. He brought happiness to millions of people. That's not something he felt or knew in that moment. The same can be applied to you probably. You probably bring a lot of happiness in someone's life without you even knowing about it. If nothing else, help us save somebody else's life by sharing some insight and some information. That's all I have to say right now. If you guys found this video helpful in any way, please like so I could make more videos that have to do on this topic. Take care.